Well, hello everyone. Just something I do. Again, these talks are not meant to be authoritative in any way. I am exploring these texts like you are and making connections uh, with my own experience and my own thought, finding interesting things. I'm concentrating here on just a passage that begins in chapter two, which kind of opens up the book for me. This is right after here I'm on page 38, where she talks about the shadow beast, the rebel in her. And then she starts talking about what she calls cultural tyranny. When I say it opened up, for me, I began to understand the ambiguity of the title of the book, Borderlands. That, obviously, in the first chapter, she's talking about growing up in a literal borderland in the Texas Mexico border and all the complications of that, the history of that, the complex history of that. But there's another sense, obviously, of Borderlands that opens up here, where she talks about being gay, really, um, and in her own culture, being different, and so that helped. This is really uh, opening up for me, I guess, as a reader. And she says some things about her own culture, which are quite striking and critical, and that is starts with what it means to be a woman in her culture and being oppressed. So what we have here is at least a double oppression, maybe a triple oppression. That is, she talks about being Chicano and the oppression being part of an oppressed people. And she talks about being a woman within her culture, which is oppression. And then she talks about being gay. And all three of those identities are identities that are dangerous. It's dangerous to be Chicano, it's dangerous to be a woman, and it's dangerous to be gay. And she says some really remarkable things about what being a woman means within her culture. Um, the difficulties, the constraints, really pretty amazing thing she says here on page 39, the three directions. That in her culture, traditionally, you could be a nun, you could be a prostitute, or you could be a mother. And that was it. And then saying that there is a fourth um, way that has opened up for her in her generation, and that is to go out and get an education and get a career, which is a very interesting thing. You know, we think about how this is written, I think, in the 1980s. So it's, it's an old book for you. It's not an old book for me, but how things have opened up in my lifetime, not just for women, not just for gay people, but for a lot of people who are in oppressed positions. That is, at least we can say that, she took a different path than those three choices or those three directions. Her critique of her own culture is critique of patriarchy. She says culture is made by those in power, men. Men make the rules and laws, women transmit them. And that culture, that male dominated culture, is dangerous. And she is taught from a very early age that men are not trustworthy. Men aren't to be trusted. They are selfish and are like children, and that she has to protect herself against men. Just an interesting, for a man to read, like me, it's an interesting thing to read. That is, I don't know if how generalized this feeling is that if you're a woman, you have to fear men. I mean, it's not something that I can relate to easily because I come from a different culture and I'm a man within that culture. So it's quite interesting. And then so this whole idea of the borderlands is really opening up. I think, what does it mean to live in the borderlands? It's not just a place. I mean, it's definitely a place, and it's a culture. her culture is a borderland culture. It's the culture of the Mexico-Texas border. So it's a place, the borderlands, but it's also a kind of an identity. Living in the board, not quite being at home, um, especially with her own identity, being a gay woman, and as she says, choosing to be a gay woman within that is puts her in a kind of a border, I think, with her own people, her own background, and her own culture.